All right, I'm waiting for Rick. Where is
There it
Rick?
is.
There
I had
you
a pop
are.
up. I was like
And we're
clicking on.
back. We've been gone for a while. We're really glad to be back. I am Ann Merchant, and I work for the National Academy of Sciences. And you are?
I'm Rick Lovard, and I also work for the National Academy of Sciences. I'm the program director of the Science and Entertainment Exchange.
And I think we should also mention because I am sitting in my same corner, looking the same way, but you have upgraded, my friend.
My sister gave me a green screen for my birthday, so I'm in the exact same place I was last season, but really I could be anywhere. You wouldn't know.
Well, he is the Hollywood guy, so he's got to have a green screen, and I am just in DC, so this is all you get. But we will follow the traditional pattern that we have with our season one, as we were calling it. And so I will start by doing my due diligence to say a little bit about what the National Academy of Sciences is and does, because that is our employer. And we're very proud to work for an institution that has been so relevant and so important in these difficult times. I was looking at the homepage for the Academy, and I guess I should back up to say that we are a private nonprofit institution in Washington. And as soon as you say Washington, D.C., and you say national, and if I told you that our main building is on Constitution Avenue, I would probably further convince you that we're part of the federal government. Not so. We are a sort of independent kind of think tank that was created by Abraham Lincoln in 1863 to help steer the nation towards a good course using science, engineering, and medicine, and all the expertise that we can marshal to bring together for those important conversations. And I was looking at our homepage, and there's so much that's going on at the institution. This was, I thought, very interesting. The Transportation Research Board is looking at the impact of presidential travel on the transportation systems, not any one president in particular, just general, because it has very far-reaching consequences throughout the entire transportation system, which is very interesting. We're looking at decarceration during the pandemic, the ways in which we can keep our prison population safe, and looking at ways that we might be able to release prisoners, some lower risk prisoners from incarceration, so that they are less likely to be in situations where they could catch COVID. We're looking at a blueprint for addressing sickle cell disease. We are monitoring, this I thought was fascinating, we're monitoring the biological collections that have been amassed by scientists and that help us understand the natural world better. And a lot of these collections are in danger, and they're really important for scientists to be able to understand who we are, how we are, and that we have to safeguard those collections. So it's a lot of varied work in lots of different situations and lots of different topics, not the least of which is very relevant to today's conversation. It's the Action Collaborative on Preventing Sexual Harassment in Higher Education. And so Fraser Benya, who is our moderator for today, may say a few words about that. But I also wanted to say that this is, that they have their second annual summit. Is that right, Fraser, coming up in October for this? So that's something important, and we'll provide a link for that, so that, because it's public and any of you can go to it. So we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to know that. The other thing is that we want to explain a little bit about what the Science and Entertainment Exchange is. So I'm gonna let Rick do that so that he can be our Hollywood guy.
Hello. So the Science and Entertainment Exchange is a program of the National Academy of Sciences. It's our job to be the bridge between some of the greatest science communicators in our culture and some of the greatest storytellers of our culture. So if you are a writer, producer, studio executive, actor, you have a question about science, you call us and we will connect you with someone who can answer your question about science, engineering, or medicine for free. And we've done that over 3,200 times in the last decade or so. And we've done about 300 of these events that are really designed more to inspire and tell you guys what we think is kind of cool in science. Some of our noted consults: Avengers Infinity War, Man of Steel, Black Panther, Captain Marvel, but there are a whole lot of them. If you are a STEM professional and you are new to the program, you're just tuning in and you're like, what? I didn't know this. Please, please, please send us an email or give us a call. I or my esteemed colleague Sachi, who is posting information, I think, up in the Q&A feed right now, chat thread, would love to talk to you. I want to thank a couple of people really quickly before I turn it back to Anne. One is our AV tech, Ameche, and I think Alex is also helping us out today from the AV team at NAS and DC. They are the reason that these events are possible, so thank you. Also help from Courtney Sloan, Jeff Fishman, and Sachi Gerben, the team in creative engagement here at the NAS, who we couldn't do these events without. Also, I'd be remiss if I did not thank our sponsors, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, who makes our event series possible. And now that we've moved online, they've made these events possible for us. The Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, Walt Disney Company, Film Nation, Google, Lyda Hill Foundation, Corteva, and many, many individual donors, and many of you who gave to this event, thank you. We absolutely shattered our single event record for people who gave at the supporter level. So I want to say thank you. We will be sending you one of these, which is a little thank you coin, a little challenge coin to say, we appreciate you. And also we're going to be doing some special things for you, like special Q&A sessions, and maybe even a special event that's just for you guys. So thank you for joining us to support us at that level. Quick note on the event structure. At any time during this event, you can ask a question, and I am going to be quietly behind the scenes feeding those questions to Fraser. I am absolutely 100% sure we will not have enough time to get to all of the questions today, and that's my fault. So you can blame me, and I'm sorry. And hopefully we will get to as many as we possibly can during the Q&A. I think that's all I got to say. So back to Anne.
Okay, so as you know, we sort of go down a little bit of a rabbit hole to just sort of talk about some of the things that have caught my interest, that and part of this was during my staycation. So one of the things that I think that I have been guilty of is the actually, I've been afraid to get on the scale. Is it the COVID-15? I don't know, but I definitely have gained weight. So I have a new.
I thought it was the COVID-19.
Oh God, well, I don't know what it is. All I know is that I definitely, no pants with buttons, and there's a reason for that. However, I found this, I ordered this cookbook a while ago, and I have probably almost 100 cookbooks, but this one, I just sort of languished there, but I've pulled it up recently. This is an awesome cookbook. And I know even if you're not like, a super healthy, conscious eater, and some of these recipes initially, I kind of looked at them and thought, I don't know. Everything in this book is delicious. It is so good. So I highly recommend that. Even if you're not trying to lose weight, it's just really, really good food. So I would highly recommend Amy Chaplin's book. It's very, very good. The other thing is that I learned from reading an article that I did not know that Kamala Harris is not the first Black nominee for vice president. That there was a woman previously, and it is my own ignorance, I did not know this, Charlotta Bass in 1952 was on the ticket of the progressive ticket as an African-American candidate. So I thought that was really interesting. And there's a biography of her, and I'm now ordering that so I can read more about her. The other thing that I read about was, and because we're the Science and Entertainment Exchange, I thought I would pass on that Annie Potts, the actress, and her husband, Jim Heyman, who is I think he's a producer, executive producer on NCIS New Orleans. They have created I don't want to call it a charity because these donations are not tax deductible, but they're aggregating donations they're putting them in $1,200 chunks in 3 different locations, one of which is in Washington, D.C., and handing out cash gifts of $1,200 to those who need it most. It's cash because oftentimes those who need it most do not have bank accounts. And you can go to their website. It's called All R1. Sachi will post that in the chat link so that you can find it. And I just thought, because it's not a charity, they're not organized, every single penny that you give goes directly to people in need. So I just thought I would pass that on, that the Hollywood community is doing their share to try to do good in this time of trouble for many people. And the last thing I'll say is get your flu shot. I think people are calling it the twindemic. We don't want that. So go get your flu shot. It's important. And so now I'm going to hand it over to Fraser. But before I do that, I just want to say, as you know, we don't do long, like CV kinds of introductions, but it is always extremely gratifying to me when we can have a colleague like Fraser, who is the expert who acts as a host for one of our events. I am surrounded by amazing colleagues, and it's one of the things that really makes my job really wonderful here. And I met Fraser when she joined the Academy working on the work that we were doing around the sexual harassment report. And she is just such an inspiration to so many of us for the work that she does and the passion that she brings. And not only because she feels it, but because she knows it. I mean, this is the other thing, that it's that combination of both feeling something and bringing the passion to it, but being a genuine expert around it. And it makes me very grateful to have the opportunity to have somebody like Fraser host this conversation. I mean, I think we know that this film was really inspirational. I noticed my own body language when I was watching it, that I was grimacing. I had my arms like this. I mean, it was in many ways difficult to watch. And I think Fraser, more than anyone, knows that these are conversations that are difficult to have. And so I was really pleased when she was, and I'm going to tell you, she is very busy right now with lots of things. So that she has carved out this time to do this for us is really meaningful. So I very much appreciate this, Fraser. We all do at the Exchange. And I know that our whole audience does, because you bring something very special to this event. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Rick. It's really an honor to participate and moderate this session, in large part because this film does such an amazing job of bringing to life the findings from our 2018 National Academies report that I had the privilege of being the study director for. The film even includes two of our amazing committee members, Dr. Paula Johnson and Dr. Kate Clancy, who you see talking about our iconic iceberg image, which is also in Rick's background there. So it's just been a real privilege, and to continue to work on this topic. I often share with people that at the academies, we don't necessarily start out as experts, our staff. We become experts because we learn from our amazing committee members. And that was certainly the case here. And so we continue that work with our Action Collaborative. And so I'm really excited to hear from our wonderful guests today, who are leaders in their fields and inspirations to so many of us. So let's get into their introductions. I'll start first with introducing Dr. Raychelle Burks, who is an associate professor of chemistry at American University and is also a trailblazer when it comes to popular science communication, appearing on TV and podcasts at DragonCon and GeekGirlCon, and writing a Science Meet True Crime column as well. Raychelle also shared with us that if she were to have a superpower, it would be to transform into any wavelength of light she wanted and back again. So thank you, Raychelle, for joining us. Next, we have Dr. Jane Willenbring, who is an associate professor at Stanford University, where she uses geology research to solve problems related to the Earth's surface, which, to be honest, sounds like a superpower in its own right. But she also shared that if she were to have a superpower, it would be to have the superhuman martial arts skills like Beatrix Kiddo from Kill Bill. And last but certainly not least, we have Sharon Shattuck, who is an Emmy-nominated documentary filmmaker and co-director of Picture a Scientist. I won't list all of Sharon's work since you have access to her bio, but just note that she is not just a filmmaker, but also a podcast co-host and a series producer of a Netflix documentary series. And of course, Sharon shared that if she could have a superpower, it would be to have the power of flight. So I think it's safe to say that I'm really looking forward to the next film where you three stars these superheroes. I don't know about everyone else, but it sounds delightful. So let's get things started, because I know we're all here. We want to hear your thoughts on this film. I'd like to start with your motivation. So what made you participate, or what motivated you to make, in your case, Sharon, this film? And what did you value the most about the process? Sharon, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start. Thank you all for having me, by the way. Thanks everybody at NAS. We're just really, I'm thrilled to be here. And I know Ian's really excited too that we've been able to get the film out in such a major way this fall during COVID. And it's just been a very strange year to unroll a film, as I know a lot of filmmakers are watching this right now. It's been, you know, it was such a bummer to not be able to be together at Tribeca in the room. And, you know, but anyway, this has been, it's a great alternative. So why did we make this film? We first found out about Nancy Hopkins' story a few years ago, and it was through the woman who runs the MIT Press, Amy Brand, who then became our executive producer on this film. But she told us about Nancy's story, and we were just captivated by it, and we'd never heard about it before. I was a student in science back in the early 2000s, and I'd never heard about Nancy's story, even though it directly impacted my experience at the University of Michigan. And so we just felt like we wanted to tell that story. But we also knew that, you know, science wasn't fixed with the MIT report coming out in 1999. Like, there's still an issue with women in science and low numbers. And so as we started to think more about like what we could, you know, who we could talk to now, we did a lot of behind the scenes conversations, lots of Zoom calls, you know, talking to different women in science. And we started to find some stories kind of rising up that we thought were really interesting, and some people that were, you know, talking about things that are really hard to talk about in frank ways. And Jane and Raychelle were two of those people that we felt like their stories are really important and interesting, and they're just such cool people. So we were like, how could we not include them? So that's really where the film kind of came from one point and sort of expanded into this narrative of these three different women. And then of course we're backing up their stories with real data from social scientists that sort of underline their experiences and say, you know, this isn't just people with bad luck. These are systemic. This is indicative of a systemic problem.
Yeah. Raychelle, what motivated you to participate in this film, and how did you get approached by Sharon?
I think it was an email.
Probably. Pretty basic.
I think it was an email. But the reason why I wanted to participate is because oftentimes when women in something, it can be dominated by white women and white voices. And in fact, white women is like a default. And we see that even in scientific research, where when they've collected this data, you know, you'll see women and then you'll see minorities. And you're like, where are the minority women? And so I wanted to, you know, be involved for that reason, because I think while there's certainly commonalities and experiences, there are unique issues that I felt I wanted to be able to talk about. And I think also is, you know, kind of a little bit of rebellion, is that, you know, going up through primarily white institutions. And it's I always joke that the higher you go up the ivory tower, the more ivory it becomes. But also can be very male, is that you're told to keep silent, wait till you get tenure, you know, then you can do whatever. I'm not sure if that actually ever works out the way. I mean, I don't know, but I thought, you know what, let me just start how I mean to go on, really put it out there, right, wrong, indifferent. And so those are the two reasons.
Thanks. Those are so important. And I hope we're going to return back to that piece, Raychelle, and talk a little bit more about that. Jane, what was your motivation?
I also got an email that I ignored, and then they had to send it again. I feel bad.
Oh no. Don't apologize. You're busy.
My disaster inbox. It applies to everyone. For those of you who are listening, I haven't replied to you. I just wanted to participate because, you know, ever since I had the idea to write the Title IX complaint, I've basically been telling people my story ever since then. And so this was just an extension of what I'd already been doing. But I'm really excited about how many people are getting to watch it. I actually had no idea that I would be so featured. But because I think they said, there are going to be, 20 scientists in it. And so I was like, oh, okay, I can be one of 20. That's great.
Surprise. Yeah.
And then they kept filming and filming me.
She's like, why are they back?
How long is this documentary?
Well, that raises one question that I had for Sharon. There's different styles for documentaries, and you can do the sort of interview based one that you followed here, but there's also the sort of different genres. What motivated you to follow this route of having these interviews take center stage in this film?
It's a good question. Yeah, so it is intentional. It was really like, we realized very early on that, like, as much as we all love verite style documentaries where you're just like embedded and following, these badass, I hate using the word badass for women, but like these amazing women doing their research and out in the field, and we really wanted to do that, but we also realized that they're very busy. This is the side effect of filming with women who are killing it and have all these grants, and they're doing all these research projects, and in Jane's case she's raising a child, and it's just a lot, and so we were like, we can't do that to them. Like they're already tired of us. So we really we decided, and also there's a kind of, from a storytelling perspective, like this film has a lot of things that have happened in the past. Like Nancy's story happened really, it started in the 70s, but the bulk of it, the MIT story with the MIT 16 was in the 90s, and it kind of concluded in 1999 with this report. And Jane's experience in Antarctica, also was in the past. And so we had to come up with a style, like, how can we tell these stories and make them emotional and make people, draw people in, but not show it all unfold, because it's just not how it is. And so, yeah, so it was a real challenge, and we had to kind of, we came up with kind of I think we might've called it stylistic reenactments, or we didn't use recreation, because we didn't want to scare people off, because it's not like we're hiring actors to come in and, be Jane and Raychelle and Nancy, but yeah, so we wanted to do something that sort of brings you back to that place, that environment, that space where they were, without being cheesy. So I hope we did that. But the interviews really drive, their experiences, and we were able to, like, we did with Jane, we talked for a while, right? Like, we talked at least, I think it was 2 days we did those interviews, I believe, or at least it was one long day, but it was a really, and we came back and we asked more stuff, and Jane was very nice and accommodating, and and it worked out, but it was, it's really hard to talk about some, and some of this stuff is very emotional, and me coming from a science background, I also feel a little bit of, I just really empathized, and I could totally, understand exactly where they're coming from in those ways. But there are also a lot of things I'd never heard before, and I was surprised, and yeah, it was very eye-opening.
That's a great transition too. I think the next question I want to talk about, and we're going to show a couple of clips of the film to sort of bring some of these things to light. So we're going to cue up clip 1, because one of the key messages in the film to me was just how we need to change people's understandings of what harassment includes. And so let's roll this clip, and then we'll talk about what you all think the key ways we need to change the conversation are.
Generally speaking, sexual forms of sexual harassment, like come-ons, unwanted sexual advances, those are actually the rarest forms of sexual harassment. They actually don't happen very much. Mostly you see put-downs.
We use the metaphor of an iceberg to really get across the various forms of sexual harassment. What's gotten most of the attention is unwanted sexual attention, coercion. Those are in the public eye, and I think everyone would agree we absolutely need to address those.
And then you have all the stuff that's underneath. Those are actually more than 90% of the sexual harassment. You know, the subtle exclusions, being left off an email, not being invited to a collaboration where you're the clear expert, just these little moments that make a woman feel like she doesn't belong. That's a really common experience.
We found that consistent gender harassment actually has the same impact as a single episode of unwanted sexual attention or coercion. So it is not something to be ignored.
So, Raychelle, I'm going to come to you because I know you've already picked up on some of this in your introduction on what motivated you, but it goes beyond just that we need to deal with the gender harassment part, right? There's the other pieces about how this plays out for communities of color, particularly. So tell me a bit more about what you feel is most important in changing this conversation.
You mean like what do you mean by most important? Sorry, like action items or
like
things to consider?
What would be the takeaway if someone comes to the table and is like, okay, sexual harassment is bad, but what does that mean? What is bad about sexual harassment, and what should we pay attention to the most when we're trying to deal with it?
Oh gosh. Well, I think, you know, what the film does too is highlight, really reframing it on what we think this harassment is. You know, I think like in the film, people assume it's this tip of the iceberg thing, which, you know, no one's diminishing that because there's not a hierarchy of horrors, right? It's all bad, right? And it's all bad. And it doesn't serve anyone to like, oh no, but yours is more bad. Like, cause what does that do but provide distraction, right? So I think part of it is it takes many forms, right? And the most persistent form, or what we're seeing, is, you know, what some people might call microaggression. Other people would be like, no, it's a straight up aggression, right? Like some of these things that you see, like always asking the youngest woman professional in a room to be the note taker, you know, because she's not going to contribute to the meeting. Like, you know, I mean, just even if you think that that's minimal, then you're delegating this person as a receptionist, which is its own job, right? So like even small things like that are definitely, there's a gender tint, but you know, Moira Bailey, who I believe came up with Massage Noir, there's also the intersection of women of color and certain, you know, say Latinx and Black women in a meeting might be like, oh, can you go get us coffee? Am I the help? Right? Like, so, you know, even those small things, when you've pushed people out of the room or out of the space, when they're there to do and demonstrate technical expertise, you know, then what are they not having access to? And what are, you know, what's the labor and the things that you're keeping them busy with or out of the field because you don't think women are tough, you know, or whatever the thing may be. So I think raising the awareness of gendered harassment within the mix of that, but also being mindful of what are some of these intersectional areas. It's not just, you know, yes, there is a woman component, but how is there a racialized component? Is there, you know, how am I treating trans women? Am I being thoughtful about gender neutral bathrooms, nursing moms? You know, I mean, all of these different areas that are, again, areas of privilege where it's real casual to the point where it's not about the cruelty of it. I think sometimes, and I notice the work I'm doing internally, is you think about, again, the big tip of the iceberg, dramatically cruel, if not totally criminal actions. But we don't think about these subtle and sometimes not so subtle, like actions of contempt. And I think that those are the ones, right, that really, like Paula was saying, they wear a person down because it's not, you know, one a week, it might be 10 a day. it's 50 a week. It's, it's just, so being mindful of that. And it's not about, to me, it's just about what can we do a bit better? How can I be a bit more thoughtful in these casual interactions? Because I honestly believe it is a systemic issue. And maybe I'll really step in it here, but most people aren't going to engage in these like outrageous acts of cruelty. It's going to be the 1,000 small actions of contempt that or just, shocking, conveniently ignorant, that we need to kind of work on. And I think being more mindful of those things would help us.
Jane, I don't know if you wanted to add on to that. I mean, this 1,000 cuts is, it's perfectly illustrated by your story.
Yeah, the other thing, I agree with everything Raychelle said. And I guess the other thing that's hard about it is, the stuff underneath the surface, and the iceberg analogy is that you can't get away from it. That the next day you're probably going to be facing the same thing. And so, whereas, some of my worst experiences were bad, but I knew that there was an end point. My degree would end and I never had to see this guy probably ever again. And so that makes it psychologically a lot easier to handle than the constant, like, what's going to happen to me now? Or, and not knowing as well is very hard. Like, why is this review so scathing? My colleagues never tell me that they get reviews that are quite like this. Have I risen too high for people's comfort? I think that is something that, probably even, I think it also shifts, like when early in your career, you get more of the tip of the iceberg. And then as your career, matures and you become, mid-career and senior in your field, you get to that underside of the iceberg. And it's pretty hard to take that. You think that this is all the sexual harassment is going to be over when you,
Right.
let yourself go. and then it turns out that it's like worse because you don't know when it's happening and it's not going to end.
Yeah.
It's, it's important that you just said that because you get used to it. And I think I mentioned this in the film where sometimes you're so used to these things that other people will notice them and be like, that's outrageous. And I'm like, welcome to Wednesday, and it's not, you just get used to navigating it because it happens so often. And not that you don't recognize that this is not good, but it's just human beings can get used to a lot of outrageous behavior and they just have, and so, but man, it does wear you down. Like you're saying, it absolutely can wear you down.
Which raises another question that comes up in the movie, but this question about persistence and who then can persist in those environments in STEM. And maybe we'll show another clip. This would be clip 4, because this begins to get at the question, it's not just the women who survive this and battle through it, but we are also losing other women, and there's some sort of a selection bias going on here. So let's go ahead and play that clip, which is,
I don't remember any teacher in high school being like, you can do it in the science.
If we could do clip 4, actually. Sorry about that. I'm skipping around.
But I was always impressed with those women that they didn't seem to take they didn't take it in on themselves. They were just like, yeah, no thanks.
Right. But it's also like bad to like sort of be proud of them for like just laughing it off and not making a big scene about it, because really someone should do that. But what we have is a selection bias of all of the people who make a big scene like that are kicked out of science. And so it's only the people who like, ha 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 ha, and push the cart away that actually are able to like be the women who stay.
I see. Yeah.
So, Sharon, I actually want to come to you on this one because you have a background in science and you left the sciences. And so I'm curious if you want to share anything about the decision you made and about that and how you changed careers.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, so I didn't have an experience. I didn't have a negative experience in science. I was, my undergrad degree was in forest ecology. And then I went and I was a research assistant in Panama doing some forest research. And then I worked at the Field Museum in Chicago in botany, and then decided I really wanted to like be involved in science communication and getting people excited about science. So that's really why I chose to move into filmmaking. But I do think a lot like what Raychelle and Jane were saying about the iceberg and how you can kind of start out on the tip of the iceberg, which thank goodness I didn't have any experiences like that in my own area. But I think I could have easily started to see those experiences if I had stayed in science, because all the women we talked to, I mean, we talked to a lot of people to make this film, and a lot of them didn't make it into the film. A lot of them didn't want to be on camera, but they did tell us privately that as they moved up in their careers, and as they became more senior and became, the people competing for resources, for grants, funding, that's when they really started to see this, these kinds of nasty behaviors and discrimination, subtle discrimination happening. So I really was like, I wonder if that could have happened to me. But then on the same token, I kind of see it in filmmaking. Like, it's really not that different. Like the media, I mean, I've worked on TV shows before where I'm like, hello, like I've directed a feature film that was on PBS. Please send me out in the field. I'd love to direct. And I was never able to do that. And I ended up leaving the show. So, it's definitely something I've noticed. And I can't say for sure that it was because I'm a woman, but it's a lot of guys with beards who went out in the field directing stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah. Raychelle or Jane, do you want to add something to how the selection bias plays out? How have you seen it, not just in your careers, but in your colleagues, people you went to grad school with?
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. Yeah, I think there's also, one of the things I often think about when, women in science, they often have like women in science panels, much like Raychelle and I right now. and so you do have this idea that there's one specific survival tactic that's like best, right? Best with quotes on it, air quotes. And I think that that's a really flawed way of thinking about how one goes about surviving and thriving in their life. And I actually, I often make sort of a comparison with like how animals in the wild actually figure out how to survive different things. So like there's a gazelle who just like runs away, right? And then there's an elephant, which is the one that we always see, right? They're just lumbering around, nothing can stop them. They're just charging through. And then there's the tiger who like stays and fights, and like even the people who stay and fight, we don't get to hear from, because if they win, they're labeled difficult. And if they don't win, then they're for sure out of science. And when I've mentioned this to other people in women in panel situations, women in science panel situations, they're like, oh, so you're an elephant? And I'm like, no, I'm definitely a possum. I'm a possum. Like I just huddled down in a little ball and waited for things to get safe again. And then once they did, then I marched along. I am definitely not an elephant. And I think there's this idea that they're like, all of us who are in science are elephants, and like, we're just tough as nails. And I'm like, I'm not really that tough of a person, especially like in that way. So I think there's room for lots of people to struggle through such situations and lots of ways to survive and thrive, even if you leave the academy.
Absolutely. I mean, I think another, and you touched on this, Jane, is there's different strategies for survival and thriving at different stages of your career in different environments. And I think that, you know, even the clip kind of speaks, you know, there was I didn't think of that as like, oh, the cool girl trope or whatever. No, that's a survival tactic, you know, and that's like, I'm going to act like this is cool because I know that is a response that will get me out of danger as quickly as possible, to quote, laugh it off. And I just need to get out, right? And I think that there are lots of strategies that we can use. And I think as I've gotten older, you have to do what is safe for you, physically, mentally, financially, and it can be real hard to judge folks. But if you are, again, some of the most marginalized communities, you get to make decisions based on what keeps you safe. And in a lot of different modalities.
Thanks. So we've already sped through the moderated portion of this. And so we're going to start taking some questions from the audience, which Rick is feeding to me. I think, Raychelle, you started addressing some of these questions in your last comment, but I'll see if anyone else wants to add on or you want to elaborate, Raychelle. But we have a question. How could grad students and pre-tenure scientists have better tools and leeway to speak out about sexual harassment and discrimination? And kind of related to this, any practical advice for young people who are navigating these experiences in their careers in science?
Gosh, I wish we had, you know, and every place is so different. And by that, I mean like every institution, sometimes within an institution, different departments, different, I mean, it can be real, you know, kind of all over the place. And I'm not sure what Jane's experience is, you know, being at different institutions, what's available to you at what level of your career. But definitely starting out is, you know, what resources are available to you there as far as ombudsman, graduate student association. And I think importantly is to not forget that especially if you're a student or designated student at various stages, that there are incredible number of resources. You know, if there's a cultural center, if there's a women's center, you know, where there's lots of expertise that's dealing with these diversity, equity, and inclusion issues and policies and procedures, is to avail yourself of those centers and institutes and consultations and a lot of those services, especially for students, are going to be as confidential as can be. And I say that because then Title IX issues and mandatory reporting is something to be mindful of, but is to utilize the resources at your disposal, and also the ones that are really geared towards your safety and well-being and your care. That's different than the legal route. Those are actually two different systems. It's just to kind of, you know, be a bit informed. And I think this is where maybe your mentoring network, and I don't mean your actual postdoc advisor, because they may have no idea what's going on. I mean, like, if you have a mentor that can give you the lay of the land and connect you with certain people that can support you with that has been tremendously helpful for me. I wish I could give a uniform answer, but man, I've seen a real differential response across institutions and even within institutions.
Yeah, and I can say that's certainly true in our work with the Action Collaborative. We're working with over 60 institutions in higher education, and it just looks different at all institutions right now. But Jane, I don't know if you have any other thoughts there. We had another question just come in kind of related to how to cope with the microaggressions, but also how to document those. I don't know if there was any piece of advice you might have on that.
Yeah, so going on in the same line of the last question, you know, Title IX offices can be really, yes, different from institution to institution. And so One can be helpful and another one can be just experiencing the huge conflict of interests of an office that works for the university, for the professor who, is a sexual harasser. And one of the things that, everybody asks, like, oh, are you happy? Like, do you regret doing it? Would you recommend doing it again after your experience? And one of the only regrets that I have about it is that I didn't document enough stuff. And so one of the ways that people say to do it now is to, like send little notes time-stamped over email to someone. And it doesn't have to be someone in an official capacity if you're worried about retribution. It could just be like your mom or, a friend far away. So that was one of the things that if I had had more of that, that would have made it a stronger case. And I was lucky anyway, because I had a lot of people all saying the same thing, some of whom did document, like in their field notebooks, the kinds of things that were happening. But those were definitely things that would be good to do. And how is it, how can you handle these things? I'll let you know when I find out.
Yeah, right? That's $1 million question.
I mean, I think it was in the film that I said, like, in the moment, it was kind of like a trauma response. And I just kind of like let it pass over me. Also how I got through childbirth. But I also think that I really like to play chess. And one problem with that is that you like overthink things. So I would think 3 moves ahead in lots of different permutations of ways that things could play out. And in no, simulation was I gonna like win anything as a student with this guy. So, maybe do that thing where you just pack it up in a little box and put it in a corner and then go about your life, if you don't want to do anything in the moment.
Yeah. Sharon, I have another question for you, but there's some eager questions coming in for Jane. So I'm just gonna, we're still talking about your case, Jane. A number of people are wondering kind of what your thoughts are now in hindsight about your colleague who was a bystander essentially at the time and didn't really speak up at the time. I know we have the clip in the film where he kind of reconciles with that, but what are your thoughts now about his response then and now today?
Yeah, I mean, he's a friend of mine, so I think I can say this with love. He's kind of like a self-proclaimed doofus. So like some things truly go over his head. But I think one of the things that has kind of come up a couple of times is that we are all atoms, and that what was maybe, something that we would have found, absurd and would have intervened, he had a higher level. And I feel like there are gradations of what people will instinctually stop and not. And that level is kind of arbitrary. And maybe we would all do well to lower it a bit and treat people how they would want you to treat them, not how you would want to be treated. But we're good. Yeah. He and I are good. We're still friends and everything. And I didn't want him to report, obviously, because, he had a family. I needed my degree. It wouldn't have gone well for either of us. So like there was still a power differential, even though he was a guy. He still needed to, progress in his career.
Yeah, I think that also speaks to something that shows up in our report, which is it's important to listen to what the person who's experiencing this harassment wants. And at the time, you didn't want to report it, right? So that's, sometimes people feel like they're doing the right thing because they go out and they report something on someone's behalf, which may not be quite what they want.
That's
Or
not.
they step in and you see that, you know, especially with sometimes with racialized components, it's like the white savior. It's like, nobody asked you, Kevin Costner. Just kidding. He does that a lot in film. But like, don't, you know, part of the empowerment or the agency is, do you need help? Do you want it from me? And what help would you like me to provide if you want me to provide help? And I think that really is, because the answer might be no. I just need this to go away. Or, you know, it might just be enough for someone, especially in this case where, God, I mean, I know I'm sure I have been the Adam. But is sometimes you just want someone to be like, that was not okay. Because they may not be empowered to do literally anything else, but to recognize how BS. Like, you just want someone to recognize it. And then you can just be like, okay, well, we agree. Like, you just want acknowledgement of how this is bananas. And sometimes that's more than enough, because you know the lay of the land, and that neither one of you is empowered.
Mm-hmm.
So it can't be small.
Yeah. And he did do some of those things. I mean, he would sometimes say like, Dave's such an asshole. I'm really sorry that he said that, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry for swearing.
It's all right. We're not bleeping anything here, I guess. So Sharon, I want to ask you some filmmaking questions here. This is coming up in some of the questions, but you know, these are challenging topics to talk about on a regular basis, even more challenging to make a movie about it. And I believe you did this as the Me Too movement was really blowing up. What was it like to do that? And did your original concept for the film change as you were progressing through this?
Yes, all yes to all of that. Yeah, it was really, yes. So we started kind of developing this in 2017, and then really got into it in 2018. And yeah, it was really, it's hard to talk about these you know, the issues of gender harassment. And I did a lot of Ian and I did a lot of Zoom calls with women who, you know, from all over the country and the world who've had different experiences. And a lot of them didn't, you know, want to talk on camera, and we completely understood why. But we were able to sort of take those experiences and aggregate. And like, I also learned a lot, like in the process. I realized like film people are kind of like, oh yeah, like women are just sexually harassed. It's just how it is. But then in science, it's like, oh no, we're unbiased. And there's still sort of this attitude overall of like, science is apolitical and it's just about the ideas. And so you hear that sort of dominant narrative, but then you talk to all of these different scientists who are like, no, it's not. Like, and they tell us their personal experiences. And so that was really, we were like, oh, this is really, this is an important topic and nobody's talked about this yet. And at least in the type of film we want to make. So yeah, so the film changed the more we talked to people. And we also found, we found out a bunch of stuff that we couldn't put in the film, but they're just like great stories that we'd love to we want to make like some short films that are kind of in addition to this. One is about the history of women in science, and just the hilarious kind of cat and mouse game of like women trying to be scientists over the centuries, and then male scientists doing research to say that women can't do science because their brains can't handle it, or they're going to bleed out all of their knowledge every month or something. So it was pretty interesting. So there are a lot of things like that. I also found out that climate scientists, in particular, women climate scientists, get a lot of vitriol in the public eye, and just for being in this climate change space. And I had no idea that that's like a particular type of gendered harassment that they experience. And we really wanted to touch on that in the film, but we just found that we had like so many different things, and we just could not. So this film is really like, we realized that it was more impactful, we thought, more impactful when we focused on these actual stories from these individual scientists and from Jane, Raychelle, and Nancy, because just hearing those personal stories I think is like really, really powerful. And so that's really where we decided to focus most of our efforts. I'm trying to remember what else you asked, but that's, I got a little sidetracked.
Yeah, no, that was great. So I think we're going to do one last question. We've in no way scratched the surface on all the questions that were covered, but I kind of want to end a little bit on a positive note. We have some questions too about like, what do we do? I think it's safe to say this film is extremely effective in getting people angry, concerned, motivated to do something to stop this happening in the next generation and in the current generation for women scientists. And Raychelle, you talk about this a little bit in the film when you start talking about, you know, getting together your allies and how to take next steps. But what advice would you have, Raychelle and Jane, for making the changes we need to start stopping this harassment?
No, it's do what you can where you're at. You don't actually need to wait for a majority. And there is such a concept as pace for privilege, which is a delay tactic of, oh, we need more buy-in, we need more that. No, you don't, because you're not going to get it. Like, not on the time scale, because then who are you asking to wait? So if you have your allies that are strategically placed, because you don't need a majority, you need the right allies that are going to become accomplices in the right position at the right time. And the timing might be now, right? I mean, there's a lot of things going on, and, you know, a lot of introspection, but also certain people positioned at the right time that are going to be ready to do certain actions, right? And so it's, you know, kind of in the words of my people, stay ready, right? and be ready to go. But also that's why cultivating the network of people that are mission aligned, that are, you know, gonna go and are ready to do the work and stay ready, so that, you know, be ready for that push. But you can, it may not be the big systemic campus-wide thing, but if you've got enough folks in your little entity, you could change your lab. You could change this committee doing something a bit better. You could change this division of a workplace, right? This professional society. So I think, I know for a fact, especially today with some of the decisions and news that's been handed down in Breonna Taylor's case, is the overwhelming crushing you can feel. But, you know, I'm still a PI in charge of a group, in charge of this many people, this small thing. So what change can I affect? Well, I can absolutely remake my policies to be more mindful of XYZ, right? And I can actually align myself with my colleagues, and we're going to do we had a meeting today about a certain action that we can do college-wide, we can do it this term and really see some change. And so kind of a little bit focusing on that. And it's not that you're not mindful of the big stuff, but it's also not your responsibility to fix, especially marginalized communities. What is the thing you can do? Do that thing with your gang, right? And that's what I'm focused on. What can I do with my gang?
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's a brilliant concluding remark. Thank you, Raychelle, Jane, Shannon. I think we could have gone on for another 30 minutes or an hour, but I'll pass things back to Anne and Rick.
Oh, Anne, you're on mute.
I hit it, but it didn't work. I had to hit it again. But we hate to hit mute on any of you, because this was such a great conversation, and we're so grateful to all of you. I did want to just hold up the notebook that I've been using recently. If you can read that, I thought it was actually pretty good for today's conversation. I have a whole collection of these notebooks, but I thought this was the right one to be using for today. So I think we for those of you who haven't had a chance to see the film, I think the link is good through the end of today. So go do it if you haven't seen it. And Rick, I guess you made good on your promise that there was no way you were going to be able to feed all those questions to Fraser.
Yeah, so sorry to everybody, we got 125 questions that we didn't get to, and maybe, I don't know, Fraser, how many you were able to do, but you did a lot. So thank you for.
I know, and really, this is a conversation. It's why this movie, Sharon, was so important, because it's a big conversation. It's why the Action Collaborative exists. We didn't finish our work with that one report at the Academy, and this is an ongoing conversation. And I think I had used one of your quotes from the film, Raychelle, you know, that action is required, that this is what we have to do. And I have to say, one of the toughest moments in the film, Raychelle, for me was when I saw you start to cry, because your laugh is one of the biggest things, and I've known you for a long time. And so when that laugh isn't there, it's just really hard. So thanks to all of you, and thanks to everyone who joined us today, because we're very glad that you were part of this conversation. We are back next week, and we will be talking to our friends at Johns Hopkins University. It's the team behind that COVID map, that little thing that we all kind of click on obsessively to find out the statistics. We're bringing together the data team from Johns Hopkins to help us understand how that was put together. But moreover, we are bringing a bioethicist into the conversation. Yes, Fraser, it is Jeff Kahn, who is somebody that we both know well. And Jeff is going to also give us some of the human component behind those numbers, because it's never just data. So thank you very much for being here. And thanks to our amazing panel today. So until next week, bye.
Thank you. Bye.